Adam Fleming there with a potted history of manifestos. It will be the Conservatives' turn tomorrow with their manifesto. But to find out how they're taking on Labour's announcements today, let's speak to the Culture Secretary, Sajid Javid. Welcome back to the Daily Politics.
Hello.
So, is Labour now the party of fiscal responsibility?
Well, that promise made by Ed Miliband today is a completely worthless promise.
Which promise?
About fiscal credibility, about how he's going to balance the country's books. First, if you just look at the history of the last Labour government, back in '97, the last Shadow Chancellor to make such a promise was Gordon Brown. He actually promised iron discipline with the nation's finances. The result was the biggest budget deficit in our peacetime history, the biggest bust our country had seen in almost 100 years. But if that's not bad enough, the time they've actually been in opposition was plenty of time for them to apologise for what happened.
They have apologised.
And show that they actually changed their way.
Right, okay.
But they have voted against, in the last Parliament, they voted against every single decision that we took, many of them difficult decisions, to start balancing the books, to start reducing the deficit, to bring growth back. And now they want the nation to believe that suddenly a leopard has changed its spots.
All right, well, let's
I'm
have a
afraid
look.
it's not that easy.
Let's have a look. What Labour has done is it's guaranteed that each of its policies will be fully funded. They've said that in their manifesto. Will that be the same for your manifesto?
Well, first of all, I mean, they've said that. That doesn't mean to say that's
absolutely
that's correct.
Will it be
because
the same in your manifesto?
They've also, but I will come to that. But let's say they've also said today again. They've said they will cut the deficit each year.
Yes.
They've actually, in the last Parliament, they voted with us to have a budget reduction of £30 billion over the next 5 years. They haven't said how they're going to reach those reductions at all.
Right.
Every tax rise they've talked about, they then allocate to some spending increase. But they haven't said how they're going to cut the £30 billion from the deficit. And half of that, they've said themselves, will come from tax rises. They haven't said which taxes they will raise to try and meet that commitment. So today's...
As you say, they haven't spelt out exactly how they're going to reach some of their goals. So let's have a look at some of yours. Is it going to be the case on health that it will be fully funded, the £8 billion that has now been pledged, extra money to health?
Well, we said back in 2010 that the NHS will be protected. It's a valuable service to us all, and that will never be put in doubt by us.
But that's not the answer to my question. You've just said, hang on a second, Sajid Javid, you have just said that you don't believe a word that Labour says, that its promises are on shifting sands. So can you tell me, on health, because you are implying that you will fully fund all your pledges, where will the extra £8 billion that you've pledged for the NHS come from?
Well, I've said that about Labour because I said look at their track record.
And you've done that?
No, both in government and in opposition. Now, and I'm answering your question, which is look at our track record. Look at the last 5 years. What have you seen?
Right, well, I'll tell you what I've seen.
You've seen the deficit falling by a half.
Yeah, you've
seen growth coming back to the country and protection of vital services like the NHS. £7 billion extra a year in real terms in the NHS at the same time.
Right.
That's only possible because we've got a strong economy.
Right, I'll tell you what I've seen. Failure to clear the deficit when you said you would clear the deficit. We have a deficit that stands at £90 billion. That's your record. Your other record is you said you'd have debt falling as a proportion of GDP. In this Parliament, you failed on that too. So when you're talking about people's records and you're asking people to trust you, I ask you again, where will you find £8 billion extra for the NHS?
Well, first of all, I'm afraid I don't accept your points because we have seen...
You haven't cleared the deficit.
No, but we have seen over the last 5 years the deficit is now down by more than a half as a portion of GDP.
It's not what you promised.
It is, well, actually, if you want to use the analysis back, no, if you want to use the analysis back in 2010, which was given by the independent OBR, you also then have to listen to what they said subsequently about why it was harder to clear the deficit. We had an international commodity crisis, we had the Eurozone crisis.
So there are unforeseen crises?
No, so there are instances that can happen in the global economy that can make a difference. But we've managed to get the deficit down by more than a half, and we've managed to get the economy growing now actually more strongly than any other major industrialised country. Employment is at its highest level since records began, and at the same time we've delivered billions of pounds in tax cuts for working people and funded the NHS and education, and that's only possible because we've got a credible plan and we need to stick to that plan. If we abandon it and go Miliband's way, then we'll end up back in 2010.
So you're relying on the proceeds of growth to find this £8 billion extra. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that it is essential to, if you want to fund public services, to have a strong economy.
So it's
that
not
is something
funded. You're
that
relying on
Labour
the
just
proceeds
does
of
not
growth.
understand.
What are the forecasts for growth over the next few years?
Well, we actually just saw them recently in the, if we take
they?
the independent OBR ones. So last year was the strongest of any G7 country. Over this year and next year, we also have strong growth, stronger than any other major European country.
Is it falling from next year?
Of course, growth, there'll be a slight up and down, but the growth is strong in Britain, stronger than any other European country in terms of forecasts.
Is it a funded spending pledge, or is it just relying on the proceeds of growth, which you have just said to me that there was a global crisis, there was a Eurozone crisis, that's why you couldn't cut or eliminate the deficit in the way that you promised? Are you saying to me you can guarantee there will be no recession in the next Parliament, there will be no crisis in the world that could derail your proceeds of growth promise?
I'm saying rely on our track record. And of course...
But your track record, as we've just established, you didn't actually do what you said you were going to do. Either you accept that there are unforeseen circumstances in the economy, like a global crash and a Eurozone crisis, which can derail your promises to eliminate the deficit, or you don't. Now, you're relying on the proceeds of growth. The IFS have actually said if you want to spend an extra £8 billion on health, you either hope that the economy will grow even more strongly than the OBR thinks, or you will have to do more on spending cuts or tax increases. So which of those two are you going to do?
I think our track record speaks for itself.
No,
in the last 5 years,
Sajid Javid,
we've had difficult circumstances. We've
rely.
had global problems in the economy, but despite that, the deficit keeps coming down, the economy keeps growing, employment keeps growing, and we're able to invest again and again in public services. That's our track record. Now, when you started off talking about Labour, now look at their track record.
We've done Labour.
A track record where there's been no delivery whatsoever.
Yes, but you started by saying you've got to be able to trust parties. And I am putting to you that why should we trust the Tories who are saying that they would be able to find £8 billion out of thin air? It's an IOU, as Ed Miliband has said. Where will you find £8 billion? Will it be from more spending cuts, or will it be from tax increases?
It's a track record of delivery.
So and when it
comes to spending cuts, we've been very clear. To clear the deficit, the rest of the deficit, there is going to be a requirement for £30 billion more of deficit reduction. We've said where we want that to come from. We've laid out our plans, a lot more detail than Labour has laid out. And that's been clear. So if we can show that we can cut the deficit and we can continue the growth.
Sajid Javid, who said all parts of the United Kingdom face a health challenge, but the real risk to the NHS is the risk of unfunded spending commitments bringing chaos to our economy, which would wreck our NHS? Who said that?
Well, I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Yeah, it's David Cameron, and it's only in January. So who is bringing unfunded spending commitments to the table here?
Now, we're bringing spending commitments that are based on a track record of growth.
They're not costed, are they?
I think that the British people will decide for themselves when it comes to May the 7th, and they will have to face the choice that everyone will have to decide. It's either David Cameron or it's Ed Miliband.
All right.
And that's the choice. And you can stick with David Cameron on a long-term plan that's working, or Ed Miliband, an economic crisis. Every single Labour government in history has resulted in an economic crisis.
Right. So
the question is, why would Ed Miliband be any different?
You're relying on track record. That is your funded spending commitment on the NHS. It's called a track record. Okay.
And we're relying on the fact that we have taken many difficult decisions over the last 5 years, and we will continue to do so. That is what's required if you want the recovery to continue.
Do you think it's economically prudent to promise £8 billion of unfunded spending?
I think what makes sense is to show that you have a long-term plan that's working, that can deliver, strengthen the economy, that can pay for public services.
So you won't tell us exactly where you're going to get the money. What about welfare? Is that also going to be done on your track record? You won't tell the viewers, you won't tell the voters where £12 billion of further spending savings are going to come from. Where are they going to come from?
Again, look at our track record. Back in 2010,
right.
we said difficult decisions were required.
With
welfare,
with the carers allowance.
Look at our track record. We've had £20 billion of savings a year from the welfare budget, still one of the biggest budgets in terms of government spending, and we believe we can find another £12 billion in cost savings from the welfare budget.
But you won't say who is actually going to be losing that money.
No, but what we have said, and we want to make it absolutely clear, is our principles when it comes to finding those savings. It means cutting away £1 in every £10 that the welfare budget currently spends. And that means protecting pensioners and protecting vulnerable people, protecting the disabled, but making sure you have a welfare system that makes people
Sajid Javid,
work.
We have had emails from people saying they're worried that their disability allowance may be cut further, that their carers allowance may be cut. You're not going to tell the voters who is going to suffer as a result of those £12 billion of welfare cuts before the election, are you?
what we're making clear...
Will you tell them?
What we will make clear, and we have said, and we will make it clearer, is that...
When will you make it clearer?
No, what we will make clear is the principles that go alongside when we make the decision on the welfare budget. We will protect the most vulnerable, as we did in the last 5 years. We will protect pensioners, we will protect the disabled, and we will make sure we have a welfare system that makes work pay.
Where the cuts
Those
will
are
come.
the principles that will determine where the cuts can come. But it is essential, if we want to balance the books without having tax increases, without cutting further departmental spending, then we have to tackle that welfare budget and save £1 in every £10 that is currently being spent.
Yes, so you're going to have lower taxes, less government debt, a higher NHS budget, and you're going to do all of that with no extra borrowing and no further spending cuts than you've outlined. You've become a magician.
I think, well, what we've become is what you've seen in the last 5 years.
You're
a Conservative Party
out the window.
with a plan that has delivered every single one of those things that you just mentioned.
Is. That's
we've
the
done
problem.
it. Well, we've done it in the last 5 years, and I think we had that credible record that has shown how if you have a plan and you stick to it, that we can continue with the growth.
He's found a magic money tree.
Well...
And you just won't tell. Where is this magic money tree? Where are you hiding it? I think the viewers have a right to know where this magic money tree is that you've stumbled across. Where is it?
It's called economic competence.
Right.
And that's our track record.
Is that for you? Is that what you would call a fund?